Alright, as I mentioned at the end of the last video, I'm filming this back to back, so it looks like you guys are getting two 10 years later videos this weekend. Hopefully you guys are excited about that. And holy shit, we're already at 20 episodes of this. It's kind of crazy. Either way, as I said, welcome back to 10 years later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later, be it for good or bad reasons. And this was an album that I wanted to look back on just out of total morbid curiosity, and also because, like several other albums and artists in this series, I just love doing these videos and reminding you guys that these artists existed. As you can tell from the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2010 The Script album, Science and Faith. The Script is an Irish rock band who broke out with their self-titled debut album back in 2008. The record hit the top of the charts back in the group's home in Ireland, but it also saw some success over here in America, with tracks like The Man Who Can't Be Moved and Breakeven hitting the Billboard Hot 100, the latter of which even made it to number 12 on the chart, and both of them even went on to become platinum singles over here, which is pretty impressive. And while this album's singles didn't hit the same peaks on the charts as Breakeven or The Man Who Can't Be Moved, it did itself perform well enough to debut at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. While I didn't listen to them much during their peak, I have actually enjoyed some of the group's bigger singles. As I mentioned, tracks like Breakeven and The Man Who Can't Be Moved remain songs that I very much like and still listen to this day, along with this album's big single, For the First Time. And I was interested in seeing if this album was worth a good listen, given that The Script kind of disappeared a bit from the public consciousness. The album is 10 tracks and 42 minutes, which isn't too bad in terms of length, but sonically, would it be solid? Yeah, I'd say so. Thematically, most of this album is ballad-driven, with smooth, easily palatable alternative rock instrumentals and lyrics that center around love and breakups. The album starts unassumingly enough, as You Won't Feel a Thing is a decent, somewhat powerful sounding song that has smooth vocals and welcoming instrumentals, though I do think the song could have used a better chorus. It's just not as catchy as some of the Script's more memorable hooks, though the 4-track stretch of singles is very solid. As I mentioned, For the First Time is a song I recently started getting into, but I listened to it quite a bit prior to this video, and I very much like the song. I love the somewhat mellow feel of the instrumentals, the vocals and storytelling are very sweet, and I think the chorus is definitely very catchy and has gotten stuck in my head quite a bit, which in this case isn't much of a bad thing. The strong string of singles continues on with the track Nothing, a lighter, somewhat darker song that discusses lead singer Danny O'Donoghue's struggles with drinking and drunk dialing. I love his vocals on the song, and the somewhat raw feel and vibe of the lyrics is very good too. And the title track, Science and Faith, is a song with a bit more spark and minor bounce to it, but it's still somewhat mellow and has some heartfelt lyrics to it. I think some of the guitar riffs are among the best on the album, and Danny's vocals are strong, especially on the chorus, which is easily one of the catchiest ones on the record. And then the last track on here that was released as a single was If You Ever Come Back, which features more heartbroken lyrics where Danny sings about hoping his lover will come back to him. The song is smooth with a nice soothing vibe and some really catchy vocal melodies from Danny. It ends the stretch of singles on a high note, and I can see why this one was chosen to get the single treatment, just as I could with the other 3 tracks. But what about the deep cuts? The tracks that were all released as singles came very early in the album, so what about the rest? Well, they kind of range in quality, but even at worst, they're not too bad. Long Gone and Moved On has a more busy instrumental, and it continues with the album's themes of heartbreak and breakups. I do think it's got a rather catchy hook, and Danny's vocals have a bit more rasp on them that works well to contribute to the song's emotion. Dead Man Walking works within some of the same instrumental formula as some of the other tracks here, and I do think it sounds very nice, though I'm not as crazy about the hook, nor am I as big on the repetitious moments on sections like the pre-chorus. This Equals Love is far more bustling than most of what else is on the album, and while I think the lyrics carry some sweet sentiments about love, I feel like the song structure can feel a bit clumsy and repetitive, specifically on the chorus, which is probably the weakest one on the album. I do think there's a decent rap-esque bridge from the group's guitarist Mark Sheehan, but aside from that, it's just not enough to save the song. Exit Wounds, though, is a compelling track. It's lighter but very raw in the way it explores the effects of a breakup on someone. Danny's vocals also really help sell the track and make this an amazing finisher to the standard edition of the album. There are a few bonus tracks that close out the record, though, starting with Bullet from a Gun. This track starts off feeling like a more guitar-twinged version of Exit Wounds, but it does take on its own unique flair as it moves on. The keyboards come in and they work very well with the somewhat pounding drum beat. Danny's vocals sound smooth, and despite the fact that the instrumentals feel a bit loud, it doesn't sound like he's fighting with them. He establishes himself as a good presence on the song and helps it to work very well. And Walk Away closes out the album with something that definitely feels poppy and radio friendly. I don't think the instrumental is one of the most compelling ones on the album, but what lifts the song from being a lowlight for me is the vocals from Danny. They're not not his best vocals on the album, but they're definitely plenty impassioned, and they work well for the song. Surprisingly, the remix of Walk Away with B.o.B is not on Spotify, and I'm not sure why that is, but the exclusion doesn't bother me too much. Having heard the song through other outlets, I think that B.o.B's verses are fine, and they do fit with the vibe of the song, but they don't really add much to it. They're not bad, but I'm comfortable with the regular version of the song, and I'm fine with it closing the album out. Overall, I think the Script's sophomore album is a decent, emotionally thoughtful project. It's a pretty safe listen, and it might not have reinvented the wheel or sounded like anything all that different when it came out, but the album works well in its emotional writing, solid instrumentation, and great vocal performances from Danny O'Donoghue. It's a solidly crafted record focused around themes of breakups and heartbreak, and while the lyrics aren't exactly mind-blowing, they're focused and solid, and Danny sells these songs well with great vocal melodies and powerful performances. It's not a perfect record. There is a small stretch of tracks in the middle that are not as strong as the singles, and some of the album does play it safe and struggle in regards to a few of its choruses, but all in all, it's a nice listen. If you're looking for something that's a bit more mellow but solid on emotion, this record is definitely worth a re-examination. Back in 2010, I don't know if I would have been into this given that I really wasn't into popular music at the time, at least not all the way. Listening to it now though, I do think it is a pretty solid album, even if it's not groundbreaking or anything you haven't heard before. If I had to rate it, it would definitely get a good on my scale. It's safe, but nevertheless solid, and you might find some enjoyment in it if you do choose to give it a listen. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back then? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it then, hate it then, love it now, hate it now? Are you indifferent towards it? Do you remember who the Script is? Whatever your thoughts are on this album or the group as a whole, leave them down in the comments. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, don't worry, I won't beg you for it. In terms of what's next, I did have to shuffle my 10 years later schedule around a little bit. There was one album I was going to do, but I took it off the list for reasons I'm not going to get into in this video. But because of that, the next album that I'm going to be talking about in this series is Maroon 5's Hands All Over. Even though I haven't been the biggest Maroon 5 fan, hopefully going back to an older project might be fun. We'll see, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.